I was watching a clip the other day of a girl splashing thick tomato soup onto a multi-million-dollar Van Gogh. Most people see a headline about a radical activist, but I saw something else. Look at the way she stood there afterward, hands glued to the wall, eyes fixed with a kind of fervent, almost terrifying clarity. It wasn't just a protest, it felt like a ritual. It was as if she were performing penance for a world of sinners who refused to stop emitting their way toward a looming apocalypse. Then I thought about a story from Silicon Valley. I heard about these brilliant engineers, the architects of our future, who are suddenly dropping everything to join fringe spiritual groups. One minute they're coding the most advanced AI on the planet, and the next they are talking about transcending their biological bodies to become immortal algorithms. They describe the great flow of data with the same hushed reverence a monk uses to speak of the divine. To them, a hacker who takes his own life after leaking restricted papers isn't just a casualty of the legal system, he's a martyr who died for the sacred freedom of information. We like to tell ourselves we've outgrown the superstitions of the past. We have science, we have physics, we have the internet. But if you look closely at these 21st century movements, environmentalism, transhumanism, Dataism, you'll realize we haven't abandoned religion at all, we've just given it a software update. The doctrines are bizarre, the followers are occasionally, well, intense, and the stakes are nothing less than the end of the world. But are they actually cults? Or is this simply what faith looks like when the God you worship is a carbon-neutral planet or a silicon chip? I've spent some time digging into these new digital faiths, and what I found is a fascinating, slightly haunting look at how we're desperately trying to find meaning in a world that's quickly replacing us. Okay, so let's unpack that. The core idea here is that these big modern ideologies, environmentalism, transhumanism, and this thing called Dataism, they aren't just political movements.
No, not at all. They're functioning as secular religions, or as you put it, digital faiths.
Right. They're stepping into this vacuum that's been left behind. They're providing the moral frameworks, the stories about the end of the world, and that sense of collective identity that, traditional religion used to provide.
But it's really important to understand the sociological shift happening here. Traditional religion, it's just not. It's not holding on in large parts of the world. You look at Europe, other developed nations, and majorities are saying faith just isn't important in their lives anymore.
So as church attendance drops and all those old rules lose their power,
you get this enormous vacuum, this need for order, for shared meaning. Human psychology, it seems, just can't stand a void of meaning for very long.
So these new belief systems just rush right in to fill it. And they do it by sacralizing things we can see and touch, the planet itself, or the idea of an enhanced human, or the flow of data becomes the new God.
It's a kind of spiritual substitution, really. And if you're looking for clarity in this crazy, information-saturated world, seeing these systems as religions is a really powerful lens. You stop seeing confusing policy debates.
And you start seeing moral crusades with their own definitions of sin and salvation.
Exactly.
And that's really the mission for you, the listener, today. When you see a protest that seems bizarre or a policy suggestion that sounds completely radical, we want you to be able to see the faith system that's driving it. This deep dive is about getting to the psychological and ethical heart of these movements.
It's about finding the why behind the most intense headlines of our time.
So let's start with the big one, the one that causes the most moral panic today, environmentalism.
And to really get its power, you have to see how neatly it adopts the structures of old school theology. It's like an inherited framework that's just been repurposed for a new cause.
I think the late Michael Crichton, the writer, he gave the most, ruthless, but maybe the most accurate critique of it. He called environmentalism the religion of choice for urban atheists.
And his analysis is so compelling because he didn't just dismiss it. He actually mapped out its entire theological structure. He saw that it has all the pieces you need for a functional faith system.
Right from the Garden of Eden all the way to redemption.
It starts with Eden, or paradise.
Yeah.
This initial state of grace. A perfect unity with a pristine, untouched nature.
And then, of course, comes the fall from grace, sin, which Crichton framed as the moment we ate from the tree of knowledge.
The Industrial Revolution.
The Industrial Revolution, consumerism, all of it, the things that polluted that state of natural grace.
And that leads you directly to the idea of the energy center. The modern human is fundamentally tainted, doomed to destroy the planet just by existing, by consuming. The guilt is it's everywhere.
And when you have sin, you need salvation.
And salvation is now called sustainability. It's the difficult, disciplined path back to a state of grace. And then you need the ritual, the physical connection to the belief system. Crichton pointed to communion.
which he said was eating organic food, the pesticide-free wafer that only the right people with the right beliefs get to consume. It's a whole system of moral purity built around what we eat.
And this isn't an accident. This structure feels familiar because the West's whole relationship with nature was shaped by Judeo-Christian theology. It created this fundamental split, this dualism between man and nature.
Well, it's the whole dominion concept from Genesis, right?
Exactly. Genesis 1.28. God grants man this superior place over all of creation and tells him to subdue it and have dominion over everything that moves. And when you combine that idea with the Enlightenment's faith in science and progress,
you get a theological permission slip to exploit the earth for whatever you want.
That's precisely the argument that the historian Lynn Townsend White Jr. made back in 1967. He said Christianity carries a huge burden of guilt for our ecological crisis because its worldview made man just completely contemptuous of nature.
So he's saying the problem is religious at its core.
Yes, and therefore the solution must also be religious. He pointed to St. Francis of Assisi as a kind of alternative model, someone who believed in the equality of all creatures, not man's limitless rule over them.
Of course, that idea got a lot of pushback from theologians, people arguing that he misunderstood the concept, that Francis's loyalty was to God, not to some, deified Mother Nature.
And that's a fair point. But whether he was right or wrong on the theology, White identified the vacuum. He saw that a religious form solution was needed, and environmentalism stepped right in to provide this coherent, emotionally powerful story.
With the planet as the god and our consumption as the original sin.
Precisely.
In that structure, it produces a really strict, almost terrifying moral code. I came across this anecdote that just perfectly illustrates the daily life of this faith. It's about a young woman in Stockholm. Her name was Alara. This was supposedly back in 2026.
Okay.
She's an urban agnostic, rejects all traditional religion, but her life is completely governed by this liturgical devotion to climate control. I mean, the rituals. It's all about the rituals.
What does she do?
I saw this clip of her weighing her weekly trash. It had to be exactly 400 grams. And she'd record it in this ledger with the kind of solemnity you'd expect from a monk reciting penance. She talks about carbon sins and ecological redemption. She found order, in the chaos of modern life through these green commandments.
She's basically practicing what you called Carbon Calvinism.
Yes.
And that is the core function of a religion, isn't it? It gives you order, identity, a moral compass. Mm-hmm. If you use, say, William Alston's framework for what makes a religion, environmentalism ticks every single box. You've got the sacred versus the profane distinction.
Preserved nature is sacred, industrial waste is profane.
You have rituals like recycling or weighing your trash. Mm-hmm. You have a moral code, and this is the key part, those profound feelings of awe, mystery, and this pervasive, crushing guilt over your carbon footprint.
And guilt always demands some kind of repentance. If you can't buy an indulgence from the Pope anymore, what do?
You buy carbon offsets. It's financialized penance. It's the modern indulgence. It's a way for the wealthy to buy a little bit of spiritual peace without actually having to give up the sins of modern life.
And when the stakes are literally the end of the world, you can't have disagreement. It's not academic critique. It's treated like betrayal, like heresy.
And that's when you see the rise of what some call carbon fundamentalism. Mm. It shows up in the language. It becomes vicious authoritarian. Mm. You see commentators equating climate skepticism with Holocaust denial. That's not the language of policy debate.
No, that's the language you reserve for heretics.
Exactly. And the policies that come out of that mindset are, well, they're alarming. We've seen proposals for a $5,000 carbon charge on every birth, an $800 annual fee per child, or even giving people carbon credit for being sterilized.
And the people pushing these ideas don't see them as draconian. They see them as righteous commandments to save the sacred planet.
It's the zeal of the true believer. And every faith needs its prophets and its heretics. On the prophet side, you have someone like James Lovelock, who came up with the Gaia hypothesis.
Right. He named the planetary organism Gaia, describing her as this living deity, basically. He's revered for giving them the framework, but even he creates tension within the movement.
Why? Because he's an empiricist, not a theologian. He's a scientist at heart.
And that tension is fascinating. Lovelock, the guy who named the deity, is willing to consider really radical geoengineering. He talked about retrofitting planes to spray sulfuric acid into the stratosphere to replace the reflectivity of the ice caps.
And you could imagine how that goes over with the spiritual, deep green wing of the movement.
They must hate it. It's like performing aggressive surgery on the body of your god.
It's a violation. And the irony is just so rich. Sulfur, in old theology, is the element of the devil. Lovelock himself admitted it was a tough sell to the religious Greens.
But his whole view is different. He wanted to save humanity so that we could help Gaia. He saw human intelligence as a valuable asset to the planet, not just a cancer.
His faith was in reason, in using our intelligence to save ourselves, which is why he championed nuclear power in Britain, an idea that violates all the purity codes of the spiritual Greens.
And then on the other side, you have the heretic, Bjorn Lomborg.
Ah, yes, the author of The Skeptical Environmentalist. He gets pilloried with the harshest language imaginable because he dares to challenge the core dogma, the idea of immediate, incredibly expensive carbon cuts like the Kyoto Protocol.
His whole thing is just rational cost-benefit analysis. He argues we should prioritize adapting, investing in R&D, and tackling other problems like malaria and hunger first.
But the emotional, dogmatic core of Carbon Calvinism can't accept that. It demands immediate sacrifice through carbon cuts, no matter the cost. Lomborg's rational approach is seen as a dangerous threat to the high priests of the movement.
So what does all this mean politically, this rise of a faith-based environmentalism?
Well, you're seeing a greening of Christianity. This growing evangelical interest in stewardship instead of dominion is a huge deal. This shared moral ground around creation care could actually start to break down traditional political alliances.
Potentially loosening the bond between evangelicals and the political right.
It could. The Catholic Church has been on board for decades. But the deeper concern, the real danger, is the creep of irrationalism into policymaking.
When faith demands sacrifice over practical solutions.
Precisely. When the rhetoric is all about sin and guilt and apocalypse, the slow, careful, data-driven process of science gets choked off. You end up with people citing the authority of science not for facts, but as a justification for authoritarian, non-negotiable policies.
So what happens if the facts change, which they always do, but the believers refuse to accept a new solution, like nuclear power, because it violates their spiritual purity code?
That's the risk. Faith replaces fact, and political compromise becomes impossible.
Okay, so that's the fate of the planet. Let's shift gears completely. Let's go from the external world of carbon to the internal world of the self. What happens when this kind of faith is focused inward, on changing what it means to be human? Let's talk about transhumanism.
This is a really powerful faith in science as the ultimate savior. It's all about pursuing radical human enhancement, using technology to achieve super longevity, super intelligence, super well-being.
Basically escaping our messy mortal bodies. What's driving this? Why the sudden urgency to upgrade humanity right now?
In a word, fear. The fear of obsolescence. The prophets here are the scientists and engineers, and they see AI advancing at an incredible rate. They see a future where humans are just irrelevant, replaced by superior algorithms.
So the only way to survive is to upgrade ourselves, to merge with the tech.
It's a preemptive strike against being made useless. They're focused on two things: enhancing our minds to compete with AI, and achieving biological immortality to beat death itself.
But the irony is, the very faith that's meant to save humanity could be the thing that splits it in two.
Absolutely. The moment it becomes market-driven, you create a schism.
Yeah, I read this anecdote that just paints a brutal picture of this. It was an interview with a guy in the Midwest, Elias, a warehouse coordinator, and he described himself with a term I'd never heard before, a term that just screams societal fault line. He called himself a base human.
Wow. Base human. That says it all. The standard model is now out of date.
Exactly. And he talked about his daughter's school. He described the kids of the local tech elite, the ones whose parents could afford the latest upgrades. They'd received these cognitive overlays, AI integrated neural enhancements, EBCIs.
So they can process information faster.
At speeds he and his daughter can't even comprehend. And he said, I look at my daughter's grades, and then I look at the enhanced kids. It's not that they're working harder, they're just more than us now. The gap is permanent.
And that is the absolute core challenge. You get a permanent, unbridgeable cognitive divide.
A biologically privileged elite. If these enhancements are expensive, only the rich get them, which just widens the gap that already exists.
And think about the feedback loop that creates. Wealth buys you a cognitive advantage. That cognitive advantage helps you generate more wealth, which buys you even better upgrades. It creates a permanent caste system based not just on money, but on fundamental cognitive ability.
Which just completely violates this core idea of social justice, Rawls' difference principle.
Right. For anyone listening, John Rawls argued that inequalities are only okay if they end up helping the least advantaged people in society. In this scenario, the base humans aren't being helped at all. They're being actively marginalized, made obsolete.
So this tech doesn't just change society, it changes our relationship with our own minds. If we assume these EBCIs are coming, we have to look past the inequality and at the philosophical problems. What happens when you breach the boundary of the skull?
You have to analyze the impact on autonomy and privacy. This is where the spiritual freedom of the individual slams right into the power of the technology.
Let's start with autonomy. It's this weird double-edged sword. You could lose your autonomy or you could be burdened with hyperagency.
The loss of autonomy is the really chilling one. If these EBCIs are glitchy or if they get hacked, you get what are called mismatch cases.
Okay, what's a mismatch case?
It's when the device fails to reliably translate your thought into an action. It's not just a bug. It's a subtle failure of your will. You're not entirely sure if the thing you just did was your idea or a corrupted signal. It just completely undermines free choice.
And it goes deeper than just glitches. It's about third-party manipulation.
Absolutely. We've known for decades, from experiments in the 1930s, that you can stimulate parts of the brain to make people do or want specific things. Advanced EBCIs could allow for the precision implantation of intentions. It doesn't just change what you do, it changes what you want to do.
Which just destroys Schopenhauer's whole idea that man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Suddenly someone else can will what you will.
It's terrifying. But then look at the other side, hyperagency. If the tech works perfectly, you have this incredible power to achieve your goals. Why is that a problem?
Because all that new power comes with an explosion of responsibility. If you're cognitively enhanced, you can't use excuses anymore. You can't say you were tired or you forgot or you made a human error. The ethical standard for you, the hyperagent, is suddenly way, way higher.
It increases the personal burden for every single mistake.
Yeah.
You become so capable that any failure is seen as a profound personal failing, not just a tragic accident.
And then there's privacy. I mean, the erosion of privacy seems total here. The data being collected is literally your thoughts, your intentions, your emotions.
It's the final frontier of data harvesting. You're talking about thought violation or brain jacking, where someone gets unauthorized access to your neural data. Think of the potential for blackmail, for exploitation.
Or even just misinterpretation. What if the algorithm misreads a fleeting thought, like a crazy impulse to gamble, and suddenly your access to credit is cut off?
And that leads to the massive problem of data ownership. All this intimate neural data is being uploaded to the cloud to train these huge AI models, what some are calling a brain GPT. Who owns that data? Is it you? The company that made the device.
And right now, the consumer versions of these devices don't have the same strict regulations as medical devices. That's the loophole.
We are starting to see some pushback, though. Some states in the U.S., like Colorado and Minnesota, are trying to create laws to protect neural data. But it's just the first few steps against a tidal wave of new technology.
And there's one last, really subtle problem, the risk of a mental monoculture.
Right, and this risk comes if the tech is a huge success. If EBCIs become cheap and everyone has one, you risk standardizing how people think. The algorithms will be optimized for efficiency, maybe favoring certain thought patterns over others.
So to compete, you have to start thinking in the way the algorithm wants you to think.
Which leads to a loss of cognitive diversity. And that is terrible for innovation, for creativity, for progress. You risk society getting stuck, unable to think outside the algorithmically approved box.
And that feeds right back into the big fear about authenticity, that these things will compromise your true self.
The worry is that the EBCI changes you in ways that don't align with who you think you are. If you believe you have a core essential self, then this technology is a threat to that essence.
But modern neuroscience kind of suggests the self is always changing anyway. We're just a bundle of shifting chemical reactions.
That's what makes it so complicated. The self is unstable, so maybe it's open to change. But what if the EBCI creates a desire to change that wasn't there before? Where does the authenticity lie then? The line between you and the technology just dissolves.
So we've looked at the risks of changing the self. Now we get to the final faith, Dataism, which just says, forget about messy biology. Just surrender your agency to the system.
Yes, this might be the most complete religion of the three. It offers a total, all-encompassing worldview. Dataism says the entire universe, your body, the economy, everything, is just a massive, interconnected system of data streams.
And the core doctrine is simple and, frankly, brutal. The value of anything, including people, is determined by its ability to process data, humans. We're just obsolete biochemical algorithms.
And the ultimate mission, the sacred commandment, is freedom of information. And this is a key distinction. It's not freedom of expression, it's the right of data itself to circulate freely. The goal is to connect everything to the system, the internet of all things.
No device, no thought can be left offline, and this completely redefines where we find meaning. Traditional religion says look inward. Dataism says meaning is external.
The algorithms become the new oracles. You can't find meaning in your messy, emotional self. The algorithms find it for you. They tell you what to do, what to buy, what to feel.
Which gives us the new mantra. If you experience something, record it. If you record something, upload it. If you upload something, share it. An experience that isn't shared, that doesn't contribute to the global data flow, is worthless.
It's the ultimate performative life. Old religion said God is always watching. Dataism says the algorithms are always watching. If you disconnect, you cease to have meaning.
And you see this everywhere now. You go somewhere beautiful, you see an amazing sunset, and what's the first impulse? It's not to feel the awe, it's to pull out your phone, capture it, upload it, and check for likes. We're proving our value by turning our lives into data.
And this faith, just like the others, has its martyrs, people who die for the cause.
The story of Aaron Swartz, the hacker. He was a true believer. He downloaded and released millions of scientific papers from the paid database JSTOR.
A purely dataist act. In that faith, putting information behind a paywall is the ultimate heresy. So his crime was a righteous act in service of the divine principle of information flow.
And his suicide, to his followers, was an act of martyrdom.
Without question. It spurred more attacks, more data being released. It shows the total devotion this ideology can command.
This relentless drive for optimization and surrender of free will, it leads to the ultimate compromise of our autonomy. I read this post from a software engineer in Singapore, Kenji, who for 3 years lived his life entirely according to the flow, an experimental algorithm that made every single choice for him.
Wow. He outsourced his entire will. What was that like?
He said at first it was like a religious epiphany. The crushing burden of free will, the anxiety of choice, it was just gone. The algorithm optimized everything and he felt this divine peace. By every external measure, his life was perfect.
He traded freedom for peace. But what was the breaking point? The overwrite, as you called it.
It was the loss of the unoptimized human moment. He described seeing a sunset and feeling this sudden, unexpected urge to cry, just a pure, internal human feeling. But before he could process it, his smartwatch pinged him. Optimized hydration level, it said, and suggested he go for a walk.
So his messy, authentic internal feeling was immediately overwritten by an external metric. The algorithm saw a biological anomaly and suggested a correction.
Exactly. And he realized he'd become just a sensor, a node in the great data, not a person living his own life. The algorithm knew what was optimal for his body, but it had no concept of his soul.
And that's the great philosophical danger. The algorithms are getting to know us better than we know ourselves. What happens to society when a non-conscious intelligence can predict who you'll vote for, who you'll marry, whether you'll commit a crime?
Democratic elections become meaningless. The outcome is already known. You don't ask your heart who to marry, you ask the algorithm because it guarantees the optimal result.
And this total surrender of agency, when you combine it with the massive consolidation of wealth and power happening today, it leads to a really terrifying endgame.
Right, let's talk about the ultimate fear scenario here. The idea that AI, controlled by the super elite, the top 0.001%, will drive labor costs to zero. It will make most of us obsolete.
And if the elite see themselves as the rightful managers of this new world, their focus shifts. It's not about managing resources anymore, it's about managing risk. And the biggest risk is the obsolete masses.
So the strategy becomes this delicate balancing act. They have to slowly drain the old economy that relies on human labor while building their own self-sufficient, automated, circular economy just for the wealthy.
And the transition has to be slow enough to avoid a collapse or, more importantly, a violent revolution from the people being left behind.
So the elite are basically building themselves a high-tech lifeboat and slowly draining the ocean around everyone else, just hoping the whole thing doesn't tip over before they get away.
That's a good way to put it.
Right
But
there.
the ultimate aim is, well, it's sinister. If the majority of people are obsolete and they pollute and they pose a threat to this new optimized world, the goal becomes removing the risks that free but not yet totally powerless people carry.
The very existence of autonomous people is a threat to total control. If the elite can have total abundance for themselves with AI, the easiest path to their perfect zero-emissions world is the gradual culling or marginalization of the rest of us. It's a path toward neo-feudalism.
Or worse, a world where human agency is systematically eliminated for the sake of optimal data flow.
What a journey. Environmentalism, transhumanism, Dataism. When you step back and look at all three, what's the one thread that connects them all?
They are all powerful, almost frantic reactions to a deep identity crisis. A crisis triggered by modern science and technology.
The moment science told us we weren't as special as we thought.
Exactly. Science tells us consciousness is just a biochemical algorithm. Technology tells us electronic algorithms are about to surpass us. That old humanist idea of listen to your inner voice is being replaced by the Dataist command. Listen to the algorithms. They know how you feel better than you do. That collapse of the special human identity, that feeling of insignificance, is what fuels this desperate search for a new God.
And each faith offers a different solution to that feeling of being insignificant.
Environmentalism offers a path to collective identity. It's through shared guilt, shared purpose, a global mission to save our deity, the Earth.
Transhumanism offers a path to individual survival and supremacy. It says you can become a god yourself, but it risks creating a biological caste system where only the upgraded have meaning.
And Dataism offers meaning through total surrender. You trade your messy free will for the comfort of being an optimized, necessary node in the cosmic system.
So ultimately, we're facing this profound modern choice. Is humanity defined by our shared vulnerability, the very thing transhumanism wants to erase? Or is it defined by our ability to make imperfect, unoptimized choices, the very thing Dataism wants to overwrite?
And that choice brings us right back to the physical boundary of the skull. The importance of that boundary is that once you breach it with an invasive EBCI or by constantly sharing your neural data, there's no boundary left to protect what we think of as autonomy. This merging of our biology with technology is forcing us to answer the most fundamental questions about who we are and who we ought to be now that the divine has been replaced by the digital.